Hi, how you going? Thanks for coming to a 6:30 session. I wondered how many people were going to turn up, but apparently there's food outside or something. Am I right? Is there food outside? No? Well, whoops. Oh, what a shame.
Macca's is across the road.
Yeah, Big Mac, that sounds pretty good. Okay, so thanks for coming along to my session. I'm Mitch Denny. I'm a program manager on the VSTS team. Recently joined the VSTS team. I live in Redmond, and you can probably tell I've got an Australian accent, so relocated there. And so this is a session that I did about 18 months ago. And the good thing about having a cloud service is that within 18 months, quite a bit can change. And in fact, as I was preparing this session, I went through and sort of went through all the release notes and just had a look at what had changed over that 18-month period. And I think I counted roughly about 100 discrete features that we'd shipped in production. So, and one of the bits of feedback I've heard from people as I've spoken to them in the past is how do they know these features when they arrive? Because we don't necessarily put stuff inside the product all the time that sort of pops up and says, hey, have you seen this new feature? We're getting better at that, but one of the things I wanted to cover off in the beginning of the session is how you can keep yourself up to date with these features as they come down the pipeline. The other thing that I wanted to just do a bit of a check on the room is who knows what VSTS Team Services is or Visual Studio Team Services is. So who's using VSTS today? That's awesome. So if you're not using VSTS, are you using TFS? Couple, so that's almost the rest of the room. And so there's probably a couple of people in the room who don't know what VSTS is. I'll just spend a minute or two just explaining what it is, just for the benefit of those folks in the room, and then we'll move on to what's changed. So Visual Studio Team Services is kind of that hub that connects all of the people in your software engineering organisation together. It's the connection point for a lot of the tools that you use on a daily basis, and it helps drive your projects forward by helping teams adhere to a common process. And it's a tool that supports doing things like hosting your source code, whether that's TFVC or Git repositories. Obviously, that's a fairly common choice these days. And it also allows you to build and deploy that source code. So we've got a VSTS build and release pipeline, so that's CI and CD. And it helps you do all of your agile planning. Well, it's not just agile. You can also use some traditional methodologies if that's your bag. And so we've got a sort of a flexible process engine that supports that. Of course, any lifecycle management tool would be incomplete without testing tools. So we've got a whole test hub and various manual and automated testing tools within VSTS. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is that we can't be all things to all people. And so over the last 18 months, we've really invested in an extensibility model inside VSTS. And so there's quite a few third parties now shipping some quite neat extensions for VSTS. Not to mention us shipping some extensions ourselves, first party extensions. If you're using TFS on premises today, VSTS is built upon the foundation of TFS. So when we build VSTS, we're also building TFS under the covers. They just have slightly different release cadences, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so the way that we approach delivering VSTS to the market is we work on an iterative cycle. So we have a bunch of teams delivering software, and we're all aligned on our delivery cycles. So every 3 weeks, we produce a product increment. And when we finish that product increment, we start deployment, roughly offset by a day or so, which is as we settle things down. And we immediately start working on the next sprint. And so that deployment is going whilst we're starting work on the next deployment. Now, a deployment will take around a week, and that's because we've got a ringed deployment model. So we gradually do that deployment out to all of the various infrastructure that we run all of the VSTS accounts on. So that's our model. So let's think about that ring deployment model, and this might help explain to you why one account that you're using has a particular feature, and another one doesn't have that feature until a week later. Right? That's our stage deployment model. So we have these concentric rings of deployment, conceptually speaking, and within those rings, we have these things called scale units, and we deploy out from the innermost ring from the innermost ring to the outermost ring. And so a scale unit sits within a deployment ring, and the idea is we progressively expose the software to more and more users as we go. And so we've got an internal VSTS account that the VSTS team uses called MSEng, and it's VSTS just like everyone else uses, but it's running the very latest version of the software. And we also deploy into that ring some internal Canary accounts. So we might have some teams within Microsoft who want to get the latest and greatest just to make sure it doesn't break them or something like that. And then as we go, we deploy to other internal accounts and other early adopters like MVPs and certain partners. And then we start to deploy to our external customers, and eventually we go big with our deployments. So that's how we deliver features. We're not perfect, and so even though we're doing that release cadence every 3 weeks, we also do hot fixes every single day. So there's pretty much not a day that a hotfix doesn't go out into production, and that rolls out across all of the service rings, and they go out a little bit faster, provided there's a baseline. We're just doing binary updates, for example, or database updates or config changes. VSTS itself is built by a relatively large team of people. So we have anywhere between 45 and 50 feature crews working on VSTS. Now, keep in mind that you might pick a particular feature like VSTS release management, and that might have 5 or 6 feature crews working on it. So you've got some people working on the back-end components and front-end components and so on. Now, I've spoken about the deployment model, and generally speaking, we try to do the deployment out through all the rings as fast as possible. But one of the things we do to enable us to control the exposure of new features and potentially wind things back if we encounter a problem is this thing called feature flags. And so if we think of this as the ring model with various scale units, we've also got accounts which are deployed onto that scale unit. So if you go nslookup your account name.visualstudio.com, then you'll get a DNS name back, which is your scale unit. At least currently that's the way it works. And that helps you figure out where on this sort of service model you are. Now, we have a single account is mapped to a single scale unit, but what we can actually do is turn on particular feature flags for a group of accounts regardless of what scale unit they're in. So provided that feature has been deployed, we can turn it on for all of our accounts in all of the scale units. So where you're deployed doesn't necessarily limit what features we can turn on for you, provided you've at least got that version of the software that supports that feature flags. So all of the code within VSTS lands on the master branch, and we always deploy it every single release, with very few exceptions. So as I said, it's been about 18 months since I gave this talk, and we've delivered lots of features in that time, and there's really not enough time to go into each one in detail. So I've picked a few personal favourites. But now that you've got a bit of an understanding on the way that we deliver updates, I would recommend that you go and visit that link, and that will take you to our product updates page. And every single time we do a deployment, we update that page with release notes. Okay? And that's a great source to get that information. And occasionally you'll see things in the product which light up to provide more detail. So with that, I'm going to get into some of these enhancements which I really like. Okay, so the first thing that what I've done here, just to help keep me on track here, and we'll just churn through these things, is I've created a user story for each one of the sort of key areas that I want to cover off, and a task for each one of the things that I just want to tick off. So I'm just going to use this to keep track of the presentation as we burn through it. So the first thing I want to take a look at is the new account homepage that we've developed and some of the just general UX improvements that we've done. So if you're using VSTS today, you would have noticed that when you go to your account homepage, so in this case it's Microsoft Ignite 2017 is the one I've created for this demo, we've replaced the previous experience, which was kind of a fairly vanilla page. And the idea here is that this is my personal view of all of the content across all of the projects within this VSTS account. And we deployed this relatively recently. And so you can see here on the screen that I've got a list of all the favorite things that I want to interact with. So I've got a bunch of repositories, and in this case, a bunch of build definitions. I can also drill down on all of the work items across all of the team projects within this account, which are relevant to me. In this case, I'm mostly dealing with one particular team project, but you can see them all there. And the idea here is that a developer actually works across multiple team projects in quite a few cases. And so we're trying to make that account landing page more relevant to the individual user. And it's really the start of some more investments we're making around a more personalised experience for developers and testers and so on. The other thing that you can expose here is all the pull requests across all of your projects, both active and completed. And if you can't find what you want there, you can of course go and drill in and search for all the projects. So this replaces the browse experience that you previously had on the account homepage. And so in this particular account, I've got 2 team projects. And if I wanted to, I could hover over this particular team project and drill into that feature area that you might be more familiar with. So if you always work in the work tab, you could drill in there and go and find the particular query that you're looking for. Of course, you can also pin a query to the home page as well. Okay, so that's that done. The other thing that we've done, once you drill into the account itself, into a team project itself, is revise the navigation. This has been out for a little while now, so I think most people's accounts should have this new nav style all set up. We're still refining it, if we've moved some furniture on you, I apologise. I'm still coming to grips with some of the changes. In fact, because I'm using an internal instance, we actually have a bunch of feature flags enabled, which the team constantly runs experiments on us, so they actually help figure out whether they're making their changes appropriately. And sometimes it's interesting. But the idea is that all of the things that you previously used are still there. They're just under these menus, and you can drill down into those particular areas. And in fact, the entire product at the moment is getting a bit of a refresh from a UX point of view. Not just the top-level navigation, but also the individual feature areas, such as work item tracking and build and release management. They're all getting some freshened up UX treatment. And if you want to get a sense of where the look and feel is going, you can probably look at something like Office Fabric, which is a React-based framework that we're picking up for a lot of our UX components. Not universally, but in a lot of cases. Okay. Actually, one thing to mention there is one of the reasons we needed to make this change is if you look at the old navigation format that we had, which I can't get into anymore, it was going to be a problem as we provided more extensibility inside VSTS. People could add entire feature areas. We would just run out of space on that top nav, and so we've got the ability for people to go in and add hubs here and control whether they're actually pinned to that top or not, for example. So we've got some customization of the various tabs within the product. Now, one of the other areas which has got, as an example, a sort of more in-depth feature area, the notifications area of VSTS is also getting some treatment. So we've reworked the alerts inside VSTS. So we've got a new notification system, and you can have default alerts set up for your team, and it's going okay at the moment. We've got pretty positive feedback. I work within the One Engineering System team, and we've got some accounts that have like 60,000 users. And the default alerts caused some problems for those organisations, but most moderately sized organisations, this is probably a welcome change because you can have a more consistent set of alerts set up. Okay. So, one of the things that we're going to try and do within VSTS moving forward is optionally expose you to some new features where appropriate. So we're doing some changes like the account homepage and other items which we know aren't quite baked yet. And so we're trying to give you the ability to opt out of those where it's appropriate. And so what you can actually do is you can go to your icon up the top here and you can select preview features, and that brings in a panel on the left-hand side. And so you can personalize your experience as an individual. And if you've got the appropriate rights, you can set it up for the account. So here I'm saying, hey, yes, I want to try the new account landing page, and we've also got a new build editor. But I can also go in and select this for the entire account. And one of the experiments that we're running here is the out-of-the-box notifications, which is what I mentioned previously. So expect to see us use this more and more. And then obviously after a period of time, once we're comfortable with the feature as it exists, we'll sort of make it the default experience, and eventually it becomes the only experience. And that's that sort of progressive enhancement of the product that we're trying to do. And it's part of the challenge of delivering a solution which is used by many, many organizations around the world. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to look at is agile planning and work item tracking. There's quite a few people using TFS and VSTS in the room. Who uses work item tracking as part of their usage? Okay, not that many. So most other people using it for source control and build. Is that fair? A couple of nods? Okay. So we've made a lot of enhancements to work item tracking. It's been a bit of a long journey, but we're getting progress. And so I wanted to show off some of the new features that we've developed, particularly to help teams that might be working as multiple sub-teams within a project and helping coordinate their work. So let's jump in and look at those features. So the first thing that I want to look at is delivery plans. So delivery plans is an extension that we've got in the marketplace, and then later on I'll show you how to find these things in the marketplace. And it's a way of saying, well, how does the work that this team is doing line up against the work that another team is doing? It's kind of like going into that 30,000-foot view and seeing what the alignment is. It's new, it's in preview, and so let's jump in and have a look. So it's under the Work Hub, and you'll see a new hub here called Plans. And if you click on that, you'll be taken to this page which has a list of plans. So the idea is that you can create a delivery plan and then decide what team's work you want to visualize on that plan and at what level. So if I go in and create a new plan, and I'll just call it demo, what it's doing is it's saying, hey, we're going to, by default, we're going to visualize work from this project, from this team, and you get to choose at what level that you want to visualize it. So I want to say, hey, let's look at stories. And then I also want to line it up against another team project, and we're going to look at their stories as well. So this default rendering, so I've got a bit of a problem here. Okay, so my problem here is that this team actually has a whole bunch of user stories on their backlog, so it's kind of obvious at this level that they probably need to distribute some of the work across. You could probably use the capacity management tools to help figure that out as well. But what it does in this view is it says, okay, here's the chronological breakup of your work, and then it shows you how that lines up in terms of iterations. So if you plan your iterations out in advance in terms of rough building blocks, so you might be working at the feature level or the epic level, you can do that on this view, and then you can see how that compares with other teams. So if I roll this particular team up, then you can see this other team down below's plan. They don't have any work items in that one, so if I went and put some in there, you'd see how they'd line up. I'm going to jump back to the dashboard here, and I'm going to, if I wanted to, I could go down and say, let's drag this into iteration 2, for example, and then go back into the plan and hit refresh. You can now see that particular user story showing up in iteration 2. So it's that combination of that iterative view and the chronological view, which helps give you that context that you need across teams. And one of the things that we're looking at adding fairly soon is the ability to sort of put in a milestone date. So you might have a particular milestone that you're trying to achieve, and so you can use that to help make sure that all of the teams that are delivering something for that particular project are lining up correctly against that. So it's kind of one of those top-level coordination views. And to do myself a favor, I'm going to go and grab that user story and drag it back into iteration 1 just so I can keep it all together. Okay, so that's delivery plans. One of the other changes that we've made is mobile forms. So this is just the beginning of what we're trying to do at the moment. we want to provide a better mobile experience within VSTS. If we sort of wind back a couple of months, whenever you looked at a work item, you'd get this form which you kind of had to scroll across a bit to see one side of the screen and scroll back the other way. So the place we've started with the mobile experience within VSTS is work item tracking, and we've produced what is, we think, a fairly mobile-friendly web experience for that. And so I'm just going to give you a quick demo. So if I open up this particular work item, and I'm just going to open up that work item directly, and just imagine that I've received an email saying, hey, you've been assigned this work item. What I can actually do is, I can bring up in the debug tools here, I can say, look, let's treat this like a mobile device, and I'll just do a refresh. And you can see here that we've now clicked into our mobile preview experience. It's not fully responsive yet, so you can't go from one to the other, but the idea here is that you've received an email on your mobile device and you've clicked that, and so you're going direct to the mobile experience. But you can see here that I've got my view of the work item. I can scroll down and see the individual details, and I can do things like jump in here and assign individual people. So, for example, I could search for a particular person to find him. Although I haven't got, there we go. So then assign that work on to someone else. So it's a mobile-friendly experience. Okay. Who's been waiting for a mobile experience in VSTS for a while? A couple of people? Great. So baby steps, we're just getting started, and obviously this will expand out into other areas where it makes sense to have a mobile experience. The other thing that we've done in the last 18 months is tried to make it easier for you to keep track of things that you're interested in. So previously, if you wanted to keep track of a set of work items which were relevant to you, you would have to go and create an alert with a query that happened to hit that particular set of work items that you wanted to be notified about. To simplify that experience a bit, what we've done is when you go into a work item, you'll see, and this has been in production for a little while now, you'll see this little follow link. And when I click on that, anytime that work item is changed, VSTS will email me. So I don't need to go and set up any particular alerts or notifications on this manually. And this is really useful, and we could have used that in the mobile form as well. This is really useful in those scenarios where someone's just mentioned you in a particular work item, and that's fine, but now you want to follow it. Okay, just to track it to resolution. And I use this on a daily basis. So we've got a pull request follow facility. So if you're following a work item and then someone submits a pull request and it's not ready to be approved yet, well, you can actually follow the pull request. And of course, the thing about code though is that you can kind of follow that at the repository level with notifications, so it's a slightly different scenario. But pull request is one of those things that you would want to follow.
The description part, that rich wiki, are we ever going to get that?
Sorry,
A kind of richer experience for the wiki, sorry, I keep comparing this stuff to Confluence and Jira, for example.
Yep.
And that's what I want to get
conversation view in Jira issues?
Well, I don't care really much about the Jira issues, but you know how rich the Confluence wiki is for doing site requirements.
So I'll cover the new wiki extension that we've got. It's early days, so I'll definitely talk about that, and I'll give you a demo. That's a little bit different to the conversation view that you get against an issue, and that's another area we're making more investments. So part of the work that we've had to do is first clean up work item tracking UI generally, and then we can start to tackle some of that, that conversation as a centerpiece work. And I've seen some designs around that, but I can't show any of that at the moment. There was a question down the back there. I thought I saw a hand. No? Okay. All right, let's keep going. Okay. One of the other commonly requested features was the ability to change a work item type. So how often have you accidentally gone, you've spent 5 minutes filling in all the details perfectly, hit save and realise it's the wrong kind of work item. Yeah, a couple of people. I do it all the time. Other than the data entry error, there are legitimate scenarios where you've received, you've been assigned a task, but it turns out it's not really a task, it's a bug that needs to be managed separately on the backlog. And so we've got the ability now to change the work item type. And the way that works is if I go and open up a particular work item, I can go and click change type. And then what happens is I tell it what type of work item I want to make it. So in this case, I'm going to turn it into a task. And I can put a description into why I'm doing that, and it supports all of the usual mention stuff. But when I click OK, what it's done is it's gone through and updated the user interface and copied across any of the content that it can. But where the source and destination work item don't align perfectly in terms of data, it allows you to go and make those necessary corrections and adjustments before you save the work item. So the work item always ends up in a consistent state. Okay. There we go. The other feature that we've got, which is pretty cool, is the ability to move work items between team projects. This was another crowd pleaser that we've just shipped recently. Lots of people have multiple team projects and they want the ability to divvy up that work between the teams where it might have initially come into the wrong team. It turns out that another team owns that particular piece of work or it belongs in another project. And so we can do that pretty easily. We can do this on a bulk level, but I'm just going to open it up as an individual and then can then go and move it to a team project. In this case, I'm going to move it over to that one and click OK. And now if this destination team project didn't have the right work item type, it then goes on to that type resolution experience where you can then also change the type. So there's a few caveats here in terms of multi-selection bulk operations. So if you're going to do that, they kind of have to be moved of all the same type to support that kind of scenario. So that's done. So that's now in that other team project. No. Yeah, no, you don't. So in fact, from an architectural point of view, so the question was, do we lose the history? From an architectural point of view, work item tracking is a common resource across VSTS, and really it's the area path that breaks things up. So this is just a way of allowing you to transition between those area paths and dealing with the potential type change issues. Okay, so I think I cancelled on that one for some reason. But okay, and the other feature that's pretty cool is the live Kanban update. So to make this work, I'm just going to pop up two screens side by side. There we go, and if I go to the Kanban board, so that's the user story level. Let me just adjust this a little bit. You can see here I've got this little radar tower kind of thing here. And the idea here is that this is a live update. So if I drag this from new to active, I can drag these across and it will be represented over here automatically. So the reason this is cool is if you're agile, if you're in a stand-up meeting and someone just needs to quickly update an item, if they've just done that on their device, that will be reflected immediately on the board if the team's standing around the board. So it helps make sure, I've been in those meetings all the time where people have said, yeah, I've already updated it, you've just got to refresh. All right, this gets away from that. Works pretty well most of the time. So that's pretty much it for agile planning and tracking. We've done a lot of work in customization as well, but I think there's another session on that tomorrow. Actually, I think Anthony Bourton. If you look up Anthony Bourton's session, I think he'll cover some of the process template modifications. If not, I'll be around, so seek me out over at the booth, and I'll walk you through that. But generally, anything that you could do with our goal is anything you can do with the XML process templates. Our goal in the long run is to support doing that within the product. We're not there yet. There's some things that you can do on XML today which you can't currently do with VSTS, but our goal is to converge the capabilities over time. You can create custom work items and all those kind of things. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is ChatOps. So who knows what ChatOps is? Anyone? All right, Richard, so what's ChatOps?
Using bots to do things.
Using bots to do things? So that's right. So it's using bots to do things. There's also making sure that when things happen in your environment, they're telling you. So it's both issuing the commands and receiving information. VSTS itself doesn't have a bot at the moment, but what it does have is integration with Microsoft Teams. And so I would envisage that teams that are using Microsoft Teams might want to you would think in presentation mode, and I'd turn that off. Okay, so the idea here is that with Microsoft Teams, I can see what's going on within my VSTS account. So the way this works is I can go in and I can create a tab, and so that tab, in this case, could be Team Services, and then if I click on that, what it's going to show me is my task board, or my Kanban board, for example. And so this is one part of our integrated experience with Microsoft Teams. The other part is what was on the screen previously, which is the various notifications. So if I jump up here to Conversations, you can see that I'm getting notifications about work item changes as I've been going through this demo. And so the idea is that your teams can be in here working, and then they can just have conversations that when someone does a pull request or a build or something like that, it appears here. So let's get on to version control. So once again, version control is an area we're trying to refine quite a bit. Probably the biggest area of focus, I would say, from an end user experience point of view, is in the pull request experience, particularly around Git, because that's a Git specific workflow. Obviously, we've got code review features for TFVC already. So if I jump into the code tab here, in fact, I'll go back to the home page here and drop into the pull request that I've got going. There's a couple of things that I wanted to point out. So the first is that we've got the ability now to follow a particular pull request. So you may or may not be nominated as a reviewer for a particular pull request based on branch policy, but you might be interested in a particular change that's going on. And so if you want to, you can actually go in and follow a particular pull request. So I can click follow here, and now as that pull request goes through multiple iterations, I'll get email notifications. Who's using Git today, whether it's VSTS, TFS, or something else? Doesn't matter which one. Okay, only a couple. So the rest are TFVC? Yep. Okay, so one of the things that we've got within VSTS at the moment is the ability to set branch policies. So if I go to this is a Git repository that I'm looking at. If I go and look at the list of branches within this particular repository, you can see that I've got this little badge here on this Git branch. That's an indicator that there's actually a Git policy set on this particular branch. And if I go in to branch policies, and if you're already using VSTS, you're probably familiar with this already. But I just wanted to point out for those people who aren't using VSTS already, what you can do is you can say, if someone wants to commit to this particular branch, then before it can be merged in, if someone wants to submit a pull request to this particular branch, before it can be merged in, this build has to run. And there are a bunch of additional policies you can set here, like making sure that a particular work item has associations and so on. So this feature has existed for a little while. One of the things that we've done is add the ability to the pull request to auto-complete it. So what we found was happening is that teams would have a pull request which is active, and everyone has approved the pull request, and then the poor guy who submitted it is waiting there for 4 hours until their build completes so they can complete it. And so one of the things that we've done is set up the ability to auto-complete pull requests. So if I go down here and select autocomplete, this dialog says, okay, assuming all of the required policies are met, then once that's done, do this merge, and it points to another piece of enhancement that we've made, which is the ability to squash the changes on a particular branch. So if you go and create a branch and you've got 10 commits, it'll squash them down into one and commit that onto the target branch, and optionally delete the source branch. So this is a real time saver for teams that have relatively long-running builds, particularly if you're running lots of test automation, for example. Though as a general rule, I try and keep your builds short. Okay. So the other enhancement that we've made within pull requests is the ability to use Markdown. So if I want to go in here and format this particular pull request, I can, and that works just fine. So for example, I could say, really, it's bang, isn't it? Really important. Let me fix that. The two hashes. That's right. Strange. Oh, maybe it doesn't support some of the heading stuff. Oh, there it goes. It's a space, missing space. Yeah, so the idea is that teams wanted to be able to embed richer text in here. In fact, some of the teams at Microsoft are actually using this. So they've got bots that actually work against the pull requests, and they'll go and insert quite rich information summaries from those bots. So they've got things like credential scanners, for example, that run. And if it detects a credential in a pull request, it'll actually go in and provide a lot of additional detail about, hey, we've detected a credential and this is what you need to do next, for example. Because there's obviously security issues with that. And so you could also do things like add attachments and that kind of stuff, which is useful when you're having that conversation around a pull request. Okay. So we've done autocomplete, Markdown. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Git virtual file system. So, and this is more of just a discussion point. This is something we've just recently open sourced. So if you go to github.com/Microsoft/GVFS, we've released an extension to Git. Well, actually what it is a file system driver with a bunch of other stuff. And you can pull down that source code, compile it, and install it. And what it does is it installs a file system driver, and it allows you to work with huge Git repositories. In fact, I'm sure there's possibly a few people in this room who haven't gone to Git because their source code repository is quite large, and maybe they feel like Git may not be able to handle it. GVFS is our attempt to work around those limitations. Now, at Microsoft, our requirements are a little bit extreme. So we have, if I just pick one code base, right? So Windows, right? The operating system we all know and love. If it were to sit within GitHub, and we're talking about just the tip of the code base, okay? We're talking about 200 gigabytes, okay? Who works with a code base of 200 gigabytes on a daily basis? Yeah? So GVFS is probably a tool that you might want to check out. So what it does is when you go and do a clone, instead of actually pulling down all of the files, it just pulls down an index, and this I'm sort of simplifying a little bit, it just pulls down an index of the files, and it just pretends like those files are on the disk. And so if you're then pulling down that entire repository, you can then work on a corner of that code base and do your build or so on in that corner of the code base, and it only pulls down those files in that particular location. And you just use your regular Git commands to do things like branching, and so branching is a fairly lightweight operation. If we hadn't have done this, it would have been unworkable for the Windows team at Microsoft to actually work with Git. The Windows team currently uses an internal system called Source Depot, which can handle those kind of large code bases. And obviously, they wanted to move to a world of Git, for example. Another team that's probably going to end up in this space is the Office team, which has similar sort of requirements, although just a little bit smaller. And so we've done a lot of work internally. It's now at a point where there are teams within the Windows division using GVFS. And so we thought it was a good time to expose what we've done to the larger Git community and get their input. Because there's other organisations, particularly top-tier engineering firms like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and so on, which are probably dealing with similar sort of size code bases. Not to mention other organisations which, because of the nature of the problem they're solving, also have large code bases. And so it's trying to help scale Git up. And I think it's a good thing. It's early days. And the team's done a lot of work to try and help scale it. We've got changes that we've made to Git, for example, to make this work, as well as the file system driver. And so we're contributing that back to the community. The other minor things that we've done in the version control space, and once again, this is just a few things that stood out to me. We've added SSH support for VSTS. So if you're using Git today, we've also always supported HTTPS. But a lot of people, particularly people using non-Windows devices, wanted to use SSH as their protocol of choice for getting cloning Git work repositories and working with Git repos. And so that support is enabled in VSTS today. And if you go into your security settings, you can actually generate or upload your SSH keys. Any questions on that so far? Yep. No, it's not true. TFVC has got huge adoption, both inside Microsoft and outside Microsoft, obviously. It's what I would call a mature version control system. So in terms of centralized version control, it's got most of the features that the teams would expect. So it's not done, but it's at a really mature point, and there's been incremental work. In fact, the same team that works on the Git work also works on the Team Foundation version control work. And so where it makes sense to build a feature so it works with both Git and TFVC, we do that. Other times it might make sense to just do it on Git, or it might make sense to just do it on TFVC. But the fact that I talk about Git a lot in this presentation is really because VSTS's Git support is still relatively new. So we're sort of playing catch up. We're at a pretty good place now, and we've always been at a pretty good place with TFVC. So you should not feel bad about using TFVC. If the centralized version control model works for you, keep doing it. We are working on options to allow transition from TFVC to Git as well if you want to do that. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to cover off was build and release. And build and release is one of my favorite topics. There's a bunch of improvements we've made here. So I'll tell you a story. So I had a customer inside Microsoft that I was working with, and they sent me an email one day saying, hey, all of our builds have broken. And I said, that's odd, what did you do? And they hadn't done anything. It was actually something we'd done. So we'd deployed an update to a task, and it was actually the NuGet installer task, and it was working fine for the vast majority of our customers. But that particular team was using a certain version of NuGet with a particular version of our NuGet task inside VSTS build that happened to produce an incompatibility if a configuration file was in a particular directory. So it's one of these three things that you never expected to happen all colliding to cause a problem. And all of their builds broke because they used that particular approach quite a bit across all of their builds. And that had us scratching our head for a while. First, it took us a while to figure it out. And then, you go through that process of saying, oh, it's not our fault, it's the NuGet team's fault, or it's someone else's fault. But the reality is that one of the challenges of having a cloud-hosted CI solution is that we integrate with a bunch of tools. And sometimes those tools need to change and evolve. And so one of the things that we've done is with task is we've actually allowed VSTS to maintain multiple versions of a single task. And if there is a major update in that task, we leave it to the user to update themselves to the newer version. So we still support this model of providing patches to tasks via extensions, and so they're forcibly applied to your build definition. But if it's a major update, we leave that at the discretion of the build owner. And so that allows us to evolve our tasks without worrying too much about a team being impacted that might be using it in a peculiar kind of fashion. So the NuGet installer is an example of that. I'll jump into the build definition and point at another example. So go to a build def. And I'll show you how that experience works. So this is largely just a default. Well, actually, firstly, I'm showing off the new build UI. So if this doesn't look familiar, one of the options that I had in my personalization settings was the improved build experience, so the new build editor. If I turn that off, I'd go back to the old version. So you've got your task list here, and now one of the nice features is when you click the task, you can actually search. So who's done a lot of VSTS build setup and wished we had a search feature within one of my big asks? So we've got that now, that's in the new build editor. And this is actually making room for a bunch of other enhancements that we're making. One of those enhancements is task versioning. So you can see here that this particular task in my build definition has a little flag next to it. And what that flag means is that the task has been updated. So there is now a 2-point-something preview version of this task. And if I want to, I can update to that. Okay? And so that way, I'm opting in to use that new version. If my build breaks, I can go back to the old version, at least for a period of time. So it's a way of helping maintain a stable build environment so we don't accidentally break your builds on you. Okay. Okay, that's the build task versioning. The other enhancement we've made is the Linux agent pool. So we've supported cross-platform build inside VSTS for quite some time, and we've had a hosted build pool. Who uses the hosted build pool inside VSTS today? Okay, cool. So it's a great service for people that want to build, relatively simple applications. You know, if you've got some really custom requirements in terms of build environment, you might need to set up your own agent. But one of the other really common asks that we had was, hey, I know you support Linux on the build agent, but can we have a pool of Linux machines that we can build? And so we've actually gone and built that. So we've got that in preview today. If I jump back into build and release, it's pretty simple to use. If I go into this particular build definition here, this is in your accounts today, and I go to the options for this particular build definition, you can see that I've got the choice of a queue. Now we've got our current hosted one, but we've also got a hosted Linux preview. And so I can select that, and now when this particular build is kicked off, it will be queued on a pool of Linux machines. That's just the way we've currently implemented it. Of course, you could use things like demands and things like that to drive this kind of stuff as well. So you can actually have build agents of multiple different platforms in a single queue if you want to. But this is the way we've implemented it for our hosted preview. And so if I kick this off, this is just a really simple repository. It's got a single C file, which I'm compiling with GCC on a Linux box, and then I'm copying the binary back out up to VSTS. So it's not a really complex build by any stretch of the imagination. And as you can tell, probably by looking a little bit closely at that build output, it looks like it's running on a Linux machine. In fact, one of the reasons I dumped out all of the environment variables was to prove that point that we are indeed on a Linux machine based on the paths that we're looking at. Question? I don't know whether our PowerShell tasks currently will work. So PowerShell has recently gone cross-platform.
Yes, but the thing is, every task we add here,
yep.
there's always one of those two options. They are node-based tasks or
Yep. You can actually, a lot of the tasks that we provide out of the box have both. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
so,
they can be.
yeah.
They can be involved.
yeah, but not all of them, right? So, where we have tools that are cross-platform, our goal is to support wherever. There will be breakages. This is a kind of a preview place we're in. But keep in mind that we've actually had Linux build support for a while, so quite a few of the tasks that we've got out of the box actually have Node or PowerShell implementations already. And I don't know quite what we'll do with the cross-platform PowerShell stuff. I'm assuming that at some point we'll support that as well, but I'm not aware of any particular plans. Any other questions? Who does Linux builds in their environment already today? At least one person? Yeah. We definitely do them quite a bit. Believe it or not, so Linux build agents is actually, or Linux build support is actually one of the most common requirements that we hear from internal teams at Microsoft. So if we look at the Azure team, for example, they have a lot of requirements for doing builds on top of Linux, and some of our really big build infrastructure at Microsoft runs entirely on Windows, and so VSTS is the only option for those teams if they want to use that. So this is a really commonly requested feature, although a lot of our teams have their own build pools already. But one of the neat things that we're seeing a lot of teams do is look at using Docker. So if I jump into the build definition here and edit it, I'm just going to disable this particular task. And in this case, I'm going to switch over to using Docker. And so what we're seeing a lot of people use is Linux in conjunction with Docker. So they'll actually create a Docker file which then maps all their source into the Docker container and run their build inside the Docker container so they can kind of sandbox their build. And it's a great way of pulling in dependencies as well. So it means you can basically pull down entire packages. So if your build requires a particular package that runs on Linux, often there's a Docker container for that, so you can take that Docker container as a base and then just deploy your code on top of it. And in fact, some of our teams are actually using this as a way of sandboxing builds to make sure that they don't pull down dependencies which they shouldn't have access to, so we can have more compliance around our builds. So I can queue that up. Yes, there is a .NET Core Docker image, which you could use here as well. Okay. Where are we at? Okay, Linux hosted pool. One of the other features that we've added is branch filters. So I'll keep moving on this, but branch filters is the ability for a release definition to be linked to a build definition or a build artifact, but be selective about what builds it produces. So within VSTS today, you can have a single build definition that produces builds across multiple branches. Now, previously, if you'd linked that particular build definition to a release definition, even if you submitted a pull request or had a feature branch running, that build would propagate into the release pipeline. And someone would have to sit there and keep knocking those things off, saying, hey, we don't want to deploy that. So one of the features that we've added is the ability to set up some, well, it's not really a policy, it's a configuration setting. Oh, my Docker container didn't work there for some reason. If I bring up this release definition and go over to the triggers, I can say, hey, I want to do continuous deployment whenever this particular build is updated, but I can specify what branch I want to work with. So I can say, hey, I only want to trigger continuous deployment when this build is completed successfully on this particular branch. So it's a really good way of reusing your build definitions quite a bit, but constraining which one of those builds flow through to your release pipeline. Okay? And it's actually, when this came out, I thought, yes, because this was one of my pain points. This is something I really wanted us to have. It saves a lot of effort, and I know a lot of teams that have lots and lots of release definitions and lots of build definitions who can reduce that number significantly. Yeah, it's a little thing, but it's a huge productivity saver. Okay, so yeah, you know what? I think that's Chrome doing that. Okay, so one of the one of the other features that we've got is task groups. So a lot of people will spend a lot of time setting up the individual tasks within their builds. Task groups is a way of reusing that effort. So inside a build definition, I'll bring this one up. What I can actually do is I can select this combination of things. Oops, there we go. Getting used to the new UI. And I can actually turn this into a task group. And what happens is it copies all those tasks into a little container, and any configuration variables which are required for that set of tasks get turned into inputs. So I click create here, and there's my task group and all of its inputs. And I can actually jump across to the task groups. I'll just save this for the time being. And now I'm building up a library of task groups which I can use across multiple builds. So I can use this task group as if it were a task in another build. Okay, task groups. Variable groups is a similar thing to task groups, but it's more about making reusable variables, and currently it only applies to release management. Expect that to evolve over time to include VSTS build. Another really cool feature that we've got is server-side tasks. So one of the problems with really long-running operations is that it consumes a build agent. So server-side tasks, what it does is instead of blocking an agent and stopping other builds using that agent, what it does is it hands control back to VSTS, and VSTS will queue, depending on how you set it up, will queue a service bus notification, for example. And then you can have a component outside of VSTS receive that service bus notification and do some work. And then when it's finished, it can send a status message back saying, hey, I'm done. And VSTS will then resume the build by selecting another agent and continuing the build process. It works within VSTS build today and release management. And release management currently has some special UI around managing agent scopes. It's the basis of some features like manual deployment conditions and that kind of stuff. We use this quite a bit internally because we've got some external build engines from VSTS where you might be doing, for example, an office build, which takes a long time. And so we don't want to block an agent for the entire duration of that. And then finally, we've got deployment conditions. So this is a pretty neat feature that we've added. Just flick through that. So previously with release management, it was kind of linear. You would create an environment, and then that environment would lead on to the next environment, and so on. One of the things that we've done is added the ability to set up environments inside release management so that they can run in parallel, but also down the line you can say, hey, this go big environment that we've got actually requires that both the load test and the go small deployments are completed. So you can kind of use this to sort of fan out your deployment and run things in parallel. So for example, you might want to be able to go through all of these environments, but before you go out to your big environment, all of your customers, you want to have at least done a perf test, but that takes a week, for example, if you're doing some extreme stress testing. So package management. Package management has had not only some user interface enhancements. So if we jump into package management now, we're basically simplifying the user interface. There's some more work to go on here. But the things I wanted to really point out were these buttons here. So one of the things that we've... How do I turn those off?
Click on the settings icon and turn off. Turn off the Facebook URL bottom. Just say block.
Okay, cool. All right. That's annoying. When did I turn that on? So go back to package management. Oh, I'm in the wrong account. I must have closed the window. There we go. All right, so I'm in package management. So there's two things you'll see on the screen here. The first is these buttons here. Now they hint at another feature we've got within VSTS for package management called views. So you can have a single feed, and that feed can contain NuGet packages, and now it can also contain NPM packages, and we've got more protocols and package formats incoming. But one of the things that it's got is the ability to create a view which is a subset of the packages in that feed. And you can use this as a way of indicating the quality of your packages. So when you publish a package to a feed, it goes into the sort of the big soup of all of the packages in that feed. But then what you can do is you can promote that from, say, a pre-release view to a release view. And I won't click that just yet, but when I go in here to connect a feed and I select, say, in this case, NPM, I can say, hey, I want to create a feed URL of all the release packages. And in this case with NPM, when I go and do a package install, if that particular package is not in the release view, it won't pull it down. And so what people used to do is they would create multiple feeds. They would have feed X beta, feed X release, and you'd actually have to change package feeds, depending on which one you want to do. You still have to put the view in the URL. It's just part of the URL namespace, but it's a more explicit model for managing pre-release. So that's an exciting enhancement. One of the other things with the NPM support is we've also added or built some support for authenticating against VSTS fairly simply. So you go and update your NPM RC file with this configuration setting, and then you can install an authentication package from the public registry, and it will go and generate the security tokens it needs so that you can just NPM install. And there's a setting when you set up your feed to restore from upstream sources. So the public NPM.js registry can be channeled through VSTS. And that's really important for NPM because NPM can't have more than one registry currently. NuGet's not quite as important. Okay. Continuing on. So the next thing I wanted to cover off was testing. We have released a Chrome and Firefox extension, which allows you to capture both, do exploratory testing, but also capture feedback. It's the same extension for both. And the idea here is that you can send a request for feedback, and we'll send an email to whoever you send that request of feedback to, and they'll click that, and it'll prompt them to install the feedback tool into Chrome or Firefox. Edge is on its way. And they can then use that to interact with a web application, for example, and take screenshots and report bugs and attach files and so on, and annotate that user interface. And that all integrates with our testing experience, but it also captures that information and stores it against the work items as well. One of the things I really wanted to get onto was the wiki. So wiki support has been a long time ask inside VSTS. And actually, we had a partner that used our extension framework to build it. And they did such a good job that we decided to buy the extension off them and make it our own. And so it's still early days, and I'll give you a preview of the wiki in a second. But the idea here is that you can then create a fully fledged wiki inside VSTS. So let's have a look at it. So it's installed as an extension, and I'll show off extensions in a second. But if I go into the wiki tab, You can see here that I've got my Docs2 wiki, which is a really exciting name, and I've got my first page and my second page. Now, the wiki is actually bound, in this case, to a Git repository under the covers. So all of the configuration for this particular wiki is updated inside a Git repository. So if I jump into, and this is a cool thing because then you can do branching and merging and all that kind of stuff if you want to. If you jump into this particular repository, when I created the wiki, I said, hey, this is the Git repository I want you to put the content in. Works with TFVC as well. And under the Docs2 directory there, or folder, you'll see all of the content and metadata related to the wiki. And you can literally go in here and edit the wiki as source if you want to, or you can go in via the wiki experience. How do you turn off the notifications on that stuff? No, that's not Chrome. That's the... Yeah, it's, how do I do that?
Oh, that's why it's not Chrome.
I don't know. Anyway. Yep, okay.
Just hurry up and finish before we get your base.
That's right. Okay, so I've got to turn that off somehow.
Alright, maybe you go to settings, just go
This
to
one?
settings and figure out notifications from there. All settings.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, so the wiki is backed by a version control store, so you can do all the version control things that you want to do with it. But then you've got a browsing and editing experience, which is sort of richer. So if I go in and I edit this page, I can select this piece of text and it pops up an editing bar, and I can do the usual things you'd want to be able to do with a wiki. And we've got an extensibility model coming for this, so you can actually start to inject more rich content into these. But it's actually markdown on the covers, so if I press Control M, it gives me the actual raw markdown, which I can edit in this view as well. So that's the basic wiki editing experience. So that's, you go to your index page and you can sort of drill down through that sort of table of contents on the left-hand side, and then you can browse to individual pages and search for pages as well. That's all part of the overall experience. We're going to invest some more time in this because obviously wikis is a very requested feature, and we want to provide the best experience we can.
And you can link to issues and workloads.
Yep. So there's the more interactive content as well.
Seeing it's an extension now within information services, what about TFS? Can we add the extension ourselves to live on a wiki?
I'm not sure whether the extension as it stands today works with TFS. However, at the moment it's an extension. We're actually going to bake it into the core of the product. So where you've got to install an extension today inside of VSTS, expect it to just be out of the box. And once it does that, TFS on premises will get it as well. Okay. Okay, so where are we at? So the thing I wanted to leave us on was really just talking about extensions generically. So extensions was, I believe, was in preview about 18 months ago. It was pretty early. Since then, we've had pretty good adoption. And so if you're not using extensions today, you should definitely check out the marketplace. So if I go into the marketplace, and I can search for things like, well, let's look at delivery plans here, so it's in that first list there. So I can search down for a particular extension, and obviously delivery plans comes out, but not only do you see a bunch of Microsoft extensions, you'll see a bunch of third-party extensions as well. So the way it works is the Microsoft first-party extensions are the ones with the Microsoft publisher underneath them. We've got another publisher called Microsoft DevLabs. That is also Microsoft, but these ones are at a lower level of expectation in terms of their implementation. So these are tactical things that we're doing, and these ones, like the delivery plans, are fairly major investments we're making. Delivery labs, the dev labs are often developed by the community with our support, and they do a great job. And there's a bunch of capabilities that have been plugged in VSTS with the dev labs, and then sometimes these things get promoted into full-blown features of the product, either via a first-party extension or even integrated into the product like the wiki extension. So I have a lot of extensions that I use on VSTS accounts on a regular basis. So for example, there's a Git version extension which I like to use which is fairly handy. So with that, I thought I would hand it over for questions. We're nearly at time. I can go into more detail about the architecture extensions if you want, or if you want to do some questions, I can answer questions. So why don't we start with some questions and see where we go?
I'm on a DevOps team.
Yep.
For 800 users almost.
Yep.
We try to keep some of those items in our team projects, but some of those items has to be managed by the other team projects because we serve them.
Yep.
The thing is, we are trying to find a way to bring those items into our Kanban.
Yep.
Because it's still ours, but they want to manage on theirs because they
Yep.
expect those items to move and they want to follow those items.
Yeah.
Now they're in different hubs, in different areas, and they're in different team projects.
Yep. All within the same account?
Yes, in one same account.
Okay.
I can do it from Lens, but I can't do it from Kanban. When I try
Yep.
to add them, it's only letting me to add if it's under, say, the same team project.
Yep. Yeah, so obviously the Kanban board is kind of scoped to a particular area path in iteration, depending on whether it's a story or iteration. Yeah, we don't have a good solution for that today. The best answers I've got are creating kind of proxy items in your backlog that link to the other one, but it's not necessarily the same thing. It is something that we're aware of and we're thinking about. It's certainly a problem we have internally as well. So I'll give you an example. I've got teams within Microsoft that want our team to build features to make VSTS better for them, and so that's our first party backlog. And so we've got a big long list of them that we've prioritised, but those work items actually belong in different feature crews backlogs. So it's exactly your scenario. And my general advice is put the work with the people who are doing the work, and then use queries to actually bring that all together into some sort of consistent view. Because the reality is that centralized view is not really a prioritization thing anyway. So if you want to be able to query across team projects and bring it into a central view, then put the work items where they belong, where the work exists. Use queries to bring it all together if you want to, and then delivery plans when you want to visualize it. It's not a great answer, but it's what we've got at the moment.
I created a dashboard for that.
Yep.
With the REST API.
Yep.
Inside of the VSTS.
Yep.
I'm pulling everything and showing them.
Yep.
And I have one more question about this. I have another application, another dashboard that's trying to give a confidence for all users or all PMs.
Yep.
And it requires to do lots of the REST calls.
Yep.
There will be any limit on that. What I'm doing actually, I'm pulling all items, listing as a tree view. After that,
Yep.
I'm bringing all the test results.
Yep.
And I am showing the passes and the fails and aggregating
Yep.
them to a feature. And
So you're the one. You're the one that's been so actually, your scenario, we have a lot of people do that. So they build custom views and make lots of REST calls. And in fact, one of the things we've done with the service is to introduce a rate limiting mechanism. So rather than just blocking your request outright, what we do is if you start making excessive calls, we'll start doing delays. And really the goal with those delays is to sort of shave off the CPU utilization on the SQL Server behind the scenes. That's one of the measures that we use. And that only kicks in once the database that you're sitting within reaches a certain level of CPU utilization. So if there is capacity there, we want you to use it. But as soon as it starts impacting other users, we'll start to just curb your enthusiasm a little bit.
we
Yep.
But the Power BI is not giving any test results or builds.
Yep.
It's only giving the work items, that's it.
Yep.
After that, we said, no, screw it. We have to do it through
Yep.
the REST
We-
APIs.
You know, send me an email if you like. Let me know what REST APIs you're making, because there are different ways you can call REST APIs which might be more efficient. Not only for us, but also just less requests overall. So, you know, it would be good to understand what your particular scenario is, and we can drill into it. And not to mention, you know, if there's views that we can provide, that might be.
It's giving me, I have to do ID requests, collect all the IDs. It lets
Yeah.
me do 100 IDs as a package.
Yep.
I send 100 per package,
Yep. And pull it back.
get the fields, send the results.
Yep. Yeah, I'm familiar with the scenario. Yeah, sometimes people want a view that uses so much data just to present that one view, and you've got to pull in so much data. One of the things that we recommend people do in extreme cases is, instead of actually actively requesting that information on every single time you bring that page, start using things like service hooks. So you progressively get that information updated in your own data store, and then you can run a query against your own data store, which gives you just exactly what you want. And you can use a combination of that sort of push-based model out of VSTS, and then occasionally do more of a polling-based model just to make sure everything's up to date, just in case you miss a service hook.
As you probably already know from the last time we talked, build a release. Where's it come from since the last time we chatted in regards to specific versioning, dependencies, specific tools that we use from a release point of view? Can you build your own custom agents and integrate them in now to be able to handle your specific needs, or?
So what do you mean by custom agents? So,
Well, I'm just using that as an example. So, for instance, we have specific dependencies to do with DLLs, etc., that we're using that have license restrictions, and I know some of them have been made a lot easier with some of the third-party vendors that we use, but then becomes licensing issues.
Yep.
So we've got to handle those from a licensing perspective. Then, especially with some of the WinForms applications that we have, we've got specific install tools that we use with install scripts
Yep.
that we have as part of our release management. So on-premise, we've actually built our own wrappers and scripts to handle all of that stuff automatically.
yeah. So you can do that. So VSTS build and VSTS release management, they're kind of workflow tools. So what happens is that when you trigger a build or you trigger a particular environment within RM, it just sends a job down to the agent, and the agent will use tasks. Now, you can build your own custom tasks if you want, or you can just run scripts that you've already got. And the other thing you can do is, for some of those dependency kind of things, you can just pre-install those on the agents. You don't have to use the hosted agents. You can use your own private agents, and so in fact,
You can handle all of that in your on-prem
oh, absolutely, yeah.
environment.
Yeah, so what happens is VSTS, when you install the agent, it does kind of a long polling operation against VSTS. So it connects and it waits for a notification down that outbound request that a build is ready, and that pulls down the build details and kicks it off. So you don't even need, VSTS doesn't reach into your environment reaches out to VSTS for that. But
You can do it from a staging perspective, where we move one component of and up to, or a number of components of what we've got up to VSTS, and then
Yep.
continue certain stuff on premise until we're happy to move that up.
that's right.
Alright.
Cool.
Is that how Mac related works as well?
Yep. So we initially had two different build agents, two different versions of the build agent. We had a Node.js based build agent, and we had a .NET based build agent that ran on Windows. The Node.js one covered Linux and OS X. With .NET Core being released, we actually transitioned our build agents to being entirely .NET Core based, and it runs cross-platform. But if you've got a bunch of Mac machines that you want to run builds on, for example, well, then you can just install the Mac OS build agent, and they can be sitting on the desk next to all your developers, and when someone commits some code, it can pull that down and run on your Mac.
On-premise works very well, except if you have proxies, some of those tasks are node-based, and node-based tasks don't recognize the proxies automatically.
Yep.
Just you have to be careful about that. Except
Yeah.
that just works.
You
Yep.
can use Azure as well to
Absolutely.
do that.
Yep. Yep, there's lots of different options there. So what are some of the other questions that you guys might have while you've got me. Okay. Yep. Yep. Yeah, okay. Good question. I'll give a quick answer now, and then we might have a bit more of a detailed chat about your particular scenario after we finish the session. So the base limitation is that a build can only be linked to a single repository. So provided all of your source code is in the one repository, you can do things. So.
If it is Git, no.
Well, so if you're TFVC, when you've got the one source tree, yeah.
If it is Git, you just link however you like, and it just works. We have those scenarios.
Okay, I'll have to have a look at what you're doing.
We have ARM templates in one Git repository. We have the rest in another repository. We pull them together. We create the ARM templates. We create the environments with ARM from one repository, and we push the environments from the.
That's for release management?
On release management, we get the bit,
Yeah.
the Git, and the builds itself.
Okay,
We
so
combine them all.
yeah, so you can combine multiple builds into a release management.
No, not multiple builds. One is Git repository directly in release,
Yep.
and one build artifact.
Okay. I'll have to have a closer. Okay. So you. All right. Yeah, I'll have to have a closer look at what you're doing. Yeah, just because it might be a little bit different to what we're talking about here, which is what we're talking about is that the linkage between a build and a Git repository. So I might be misunderstanding the question, but let's have a more detailed conversation afterwards. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. So thanks for coming along.